Day 118. Be okay with silence. I have a really, really interesting connection to this that I'm, of course, going to get to in a moment. But I think that in today's day and world, we are constantly being bombarded by ads, by music, by different political opinions. Like, I feel like everyone and their mother is literally fighting for our attention, and we think that we have control over what we can put our attention to. For example, we walk around with earphones all day long, or we walk around on our mobile devices. But how many of us are actually comfortable with silence and actually just comfortable with our own thoughts and being quiet, being alone? Honestly, and mind you, I know that in many cases it's a privilege to be alone, that it's very difficult to find your alone time. This is the crazy spin that I'm going to put on this right here, and then I'll bring it back to my business. But when I was running for office, it really doesn't matter what party I was running for or whatever, because they're both one and the same. But I read the autobiography of perhaps the most consequential, the most effective politician in United States history, a man by the name of Mitch McConnell. Regardless of what you feel about his politics, the man's effective. You cannot call the man, he's not dumb. He's not an idiot, okay? Again, regardless of how you feel. And let's not get all butthurt by personal opinions, because that's not the point that I'm trying to make, okay? Okay? So the man made many very, very interesting, I would argue almost fascinating points in his autobiography. I actually would recommend it. Again, I didn't say an evil genius, but I didn't say, good guy, okay? But it's also, it's good to know how these people think. And one of the parts of his book that really stuck out to me was that he said he had a meeting with Bill Gates. And if I remember correctly, they sat there in silence for something like 15 or 20 minutes. And I thought about that. I was picturing that in my head, and I thought, how many of us are able to do that? How many of us are, number one, in such a hurry? Number two, we're uncomfortable with the silence, so we start saying anything just to fill up space. But taking a slower approach, taking a more methodical approach, and not rushing into things, right? How many of us are actually physically capable, right? So before I end this, the craziest part when that I've kind of seen this play out is that in my tourism business, I have been training new guides, right? I've gotten I've been training new tour guides to take over my tours when I leave town. And something that isn't really on my radar that I want to be, and that is more on my guide's radar, is that when the tour is over, you want your guests to feel comfortable, you want your guests to feel satisfied, but most importantly, this wasn't necessarily something that I'm looking for as much because I'm the owner of the business. If my guides are going to get a gratuity, that's when it's going to happen. And it is something that, again, I want my guides. If the guests are feeling generous, like tipping, I want my guys to receive the tip. That's not, again, first thing on my mind. I have a business to run. I'm not going to sit there and ask for gratuities. I'm going to leave. But what I tell my guides is that sometimes just stop. Say what you have to say. Sit there and be quiet for a second. And it's not always going to be the case, but sometimes that silence, that little bit of almost awkwardness, it doesn't have to be awkward. You don't have to make it awkward, will pay off, okay? A little bit of patience. So what I'm trying to get at, bottom line, be okay with silence.